This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Good evening. Welcome to our first non-organizational meeting. Thank you everybody for joining us. It doesn't look like we have anybody coming online, so I think we can probably get ahead to the Cassie, do you have anything that you wanted to talk to us about the public speaking portion?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I wanted to notice is Jeff is leaving. So I don't think that was on the agenda to discuss it all, or the implications of that. Or I know you guys are thinking about having him be the liaison him or his appointee, and then the planning director could then have the discretion to appoint someone, potentially me, to help be that first kind of meeting with the Bees Society. So I don't know. I guess it's your guys' decision how you want to deal with that. His last day was today. Pretty sure he might be back on Wednesday, but I think it's like which I'm never had to hear, but happy for him. And I certainly would be willing to be that person that is the liaison for the Xerxes Society. But what you guys describing, if it makes sense. I don't know who else to do it. So, reevaluate when there is a new director of planning. That I think is reasonable. Just in case you guys change your mind, I think that's fine. But tell me my suggestion, I guess, at that point.
We can probably going through kind of their using that.
And then should I talk about the cap now, or should I wait? Is that also?
It is not officially on the agenda, but maybe I want to
Go ahead.
Okay, so I was going to go through and ask everybody what they want to go back. We're all addressing each other in session. So I'm going to go back on him. So
yeah, Jamie, he, him.
Jenny, share. Ellie,
David, or Dave is fine.
Oh, yeah. And I go back.
Okay, so I don't need to worry about calling Owen Counselor in session. Yeah. Great. Okay. Back to you.
Yeah. So the only other thing I thought that might be relevant would be that just a brief update on where the climate action plan is at. As Jamie knows, we've been working on trying to get a revised draft from Weston, and so we're waiting to get that. Hopefully, I'll be getting it on the 7th. And then the revised training I've been talking about, like, what do we see what that revised draft looks like, and then send it to boards and committees. So once I get the okay from that group, then I would send it to you guys along with everyone else. That's really interested in looking at it, which we look at people. So kind of going from there, but much more of an update beyond that at this stage.
Okay, great. Thank you. And one of your quick answer questions: did everybody get emails from me about what we're going on with the committee? Yes. Okay, great. Awesome. All right. Now moving ahead. Approval of the January 24 minutes. Did everybody get a chance to read through the minutes that went on that?
Yep.
Excellent.
Sorry for late.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve?
We approved the minutes from
Do we have a
January 29th.
Great. All in favor? Say aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed? All right. Minutes have been approved. Yay. Okay. So, for review with discussion of the resolution to become a BCT.
Thanks, David. We're not, mostly because of my really unfortunate schedule. We're able to connect directly. We exchange a couple emails. Some of the process is finalized in the language in this resolution, which looks actually better here and printed out. Let's see if I can find that. We just pull it up with this computer, sorry. It took me most of the time to do with Cassie's point. Getting some buy-in or at least consensus from the planning department or the planning director to determine what we could actually put in there. So one of the questions, one of the main questions was how to determine who the liaison, yes, the liaison. And so I suggested early on the managing director of the designee, but it took me until last Tuesday to be able to reach out to have him agree to that. So that's basically what it is, which I think allows a lot of flexibility. And so I think that obviously there's consensus in the planning department. I certainly none of what I don't object to, that I would equally welcome Cassidy as that person. But I think the problem that for instance, in that position, there wasn't someone in a certain position, or the person was in a situation where they might have too much on their plate, so the planning director could pivot and give it to like this is director, or you can try to potentially a member of the committee. It just allowed a little bit of foot. He was fine with that. And obviously the planning department would be the sponsoring department. Filling in the US committee is pretty easy, and then a little further down on item E, and then now therefore number 4 section item E, there's policy demands, and basically just creating a plan for this to land in, and I suggested we just kind of make these either amendments to items within the pollinator action plan. And that would seem to make sense because that's something that already existed in the basic nature of what we're doing. The only other real item, well, let me stop there and I'll send it over to David for the other questions or comments about
One question is there, since Jeff is out the door, is there a blocker in the planning division to have a schedule on that until the times it's like that official executive, whatever, has been voted against, or maybe assume that that's going to go where nobody's going to complain?
I don't think the problem is reading the interim.
I don't think that she is formally or technically the interim. So I don't, I don't know that there is one really at this time. It might work out that she does become that, but I don't think it's a formal thing. So I don't know that it would be a problem necessarily for me to try to take those things on. I would gladly do it.
Okay. As long as you think that somebody is going to weirdly show up out of the closet and like say, no, you can't do that. And then
Yeah, I can't think of anything that would be a problem with that. I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, at this stage.
Great. Do we want to vote on that? Does anybody else have any questions? Sorry.
I like it best.
I'm just kind of curious about how this came together. Was this sort of a document that already existed that you modified?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I was going to be impressed with how fast you turned that around.
I've done a few of these. This is like everything you have the actual digital version pulled up, and everything from yellow was all the rest of it. I mean, we could, certainly it's up to the group if they have said there's a section which we can add other stuff if we want, but I mean, there's really no reason to. This pretty much outlines the nature of the program with just a few of the things we have to personalize for our municipality.
From the East of the USA side, right? So I mean, it's their template, so we're kind of giving it to you.
As long as we don't think the city council is going to go out there, I think that.
So there's just one other part right before the final whereas given Massachusetts should be certified as East of the USA community cause, and I had kind of ended that given that the data that offers suggestions, so if it's okay, I'll just turn that on to that.
Yeah, I just sort of
You want to call it the emails? That's it. You want to this part?
right. So what I wrote it as is whereas Easthampton, Massachusetts should be certified to be the USA community. As an actual evolution of the existing efforts and plans to address the impact of biodiversity loss, climate change, and other environmental threats within the city, and its commitment to support and sustain the health of local ecosystems.
Sounds good to me. I do better remember picking if I'm reading it, but also no need to make it up.
Maybe it would make sense to have a sort of a little final draft that we can all look at and formally approve.
I think, I could be there, until you make it right now, and we also do all right here.
Yeah, I would like to, if possible, get this moved out of committee and do whatever we need to pass it on to the council. Just so that we have it all right.
I think taking your suggestion and we can just say, let's plug this in.
Yeah.
And vote it out of committee and
Yeah.
move forward.
I agree. The other thing we need to plug in is planning director designee we have, and, you know, I don't know if we need to explicitly name our capacity at this point, or whether that just becomes like the outgoing planning director made it so, and therefore we're gonna have an official this week that.
The other suggestion is number 2. Repeating the planning department after, if it suggested the director of planning or their designee, within that department is designated as the Big City USA liaison rather than just repeating
So
within the department, or because number 1 already mentions the department twice. Not the department. I like to imagine in bureaucracy, you have a department of departments.
Organization is hard. Okay, I do agree with how, I think those are the things we need to get plugged in. I think we can, motion that. Is everybody comfortable with it, saying that we trust the modifications will be made faithfully?
Yes. I think we can talk about that.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
All right, motion to approve the resolution as with the intended amendments and send it on to the city council.
Second.
Oh, cool. I just didn't go. That is the motion and seconded. All in favor? Say aye. Anybody opposed? Negative. All right, great.
So I'll fix up, I'll move all the highlights, and I'll put together a letter and just send it to the next, city council. And I'll talk to the council president and me, and so these things can be voted on the first, without objection to the first reading. I'll ask if he's also comfortable with that. And if that's the case, I'll let people know they want to speak with us. That's that. So I'll keep it up with that.
Great.
And then just for my education,
Twice a month, first and third Wednesday of the month. So it's too late now. It's very hard on the agenda, which we're kind of looking at on the next agenda. So, yeah.
I just need to be educated.
And what are we highlighting the resolution? Because it's on here, it says resolution and City of Easthampton is the USA, but there's some other language being used. What am I referring to? What would you like to title this as? This is a title or resolution?
You mean the
Yeah. This
I'll just call it the B City resolution.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Okay. Anybody have any last thoughts on our first agenda item there? Or technically third agenda item? All right, great. Okay. Ready to have a review and presentation of the automated action plan. if we unpin the camera, it should be able to go more closer.
Okay. And for whatever reason, the aspect ratio, or however you want to call it, doesn't match up exactly. It's like too big on the screen, but hopefully we can make it look good. So
You can also unfull screen this. It's just a PDF.
This is the one that needs unpinning.
Good. And now,
then-
That
Thank you. Okay, all okay, people?
yeah, that's great.
Just realized that the whole TV.
I'm hoping to take about 15 minutes, but if this goes a little like I would love to time check. I think I can run here, but
You want to say, do you want to 15 minutes before 10 seconds?
like maybe a 10 to be a good Jennifer, and however you want to pop in, please do. So we've pulled this presentation together to kind of consolidate the 95 page full pollinator action plan. So there's a lot of detail that we're going to skip over, but I would absolutely encourage you to spend a little time with the plan. It's a wonderful resource. And there's a lot more detail on every single thing that we'll touch on in addition to other things. So I wanted to show this is what I'm hoping to cover, talk about the plan a little bit, go into detail about the action items split into what we could try to do as a committee and things that we might try to address as a municipality, and offer a possible framework for considering how to prioritize among them. So I want to start with just a little bit of background on the plan for those who haven't spent time with it. It was produced by a student team from the Conway School, which is a local graduate program in Northampton. That offers a degree in sustainable landscape planning and regional or sustainable landscape planning and design. In the course of the semester, a student team tackles often a municipal project like this and offers recommendations that are intended to be implemented. Many in the Valley have been. So there's a lot of interesting precedents for how this have taken these into real world. And the plan that was created in 2023 was done in collaboration with the planning department and I believe it's two institutions. Thank you for getting that on the ground. And again, it's a really, really impressive piece of work. It came together through a lot of research. I'm not going to go through this in depth, but just to give you a sense of how it all came together, that they spent a lot of time with folks from the city. They did a bunch of site visits. There's a ton of GIS, geographic information system research, kind of assessing Easthampton's physical resources and landscape, and a couple of community meetings, which I think several of us attended. And some of us are pictured in the plan, photos of the sessions. So just to give you a sense, there's a lot that went into it.
Quick question. Is any of the GIS and other related data available as part of an attachment or something that we can get back to?
The code data, yes, because there's an appendix that has every map that they include, and I'm in touch with the people who put the plan together, so I'm sure
I don't have the specific case for it.
Yeah, oh, it's incredible stuff, absolutely. So yeah, if there's anything that we want further information on, we can almost definitely get it. Awesome. So after a few months of working on it, they came up with this 95-page report, which includes about 25 strategies and measures outcome, but that feels about right, that we will discuss. Kind of the crowning recommendations and outcome of their public meetings was proposing 3 demonstration garden sites on public land. By the Millside, Rail Trail, and the library, they included kind of sample plans and renderings, which I'm including on the slides as a glimpse of what I had in mind for what that could look like. That's a pretty robust section. And also appendices that have a toolkit that's intended for residents who want to convert a lawn garden with how to approach that, lists, where to get plans, planting plans. So there's a lot of really, really robust resources that I think we can use in some of our next steps here. Okay, so to distill some of the action items, I think these are kind of the top level points of things that we could try to tackle as a committee. And my concept for these as a whole is that I think that the committee level things are maybe easier
shorter timelines. They may be smaller in terms of impact, but I think they're really important starting places. Okay, so the first one, they recommend that we connect with existing pollinator certification and registration programs so that people who already have gardens can get registered, receive signage that already exists, and add their square footage to existing databases. There's a lot of different options for who we could connect with. I've pulled out the ones that I think are doing excellent work, and we can definitely discuss which of these would be the right fit. That might be another kind of research project. There's a lot of really cool resources as far as mapping and calculating how much acreage is already included. I'll just mention that the 1001 pollinator gardens is specific to Western Mass, run by the person who runs Megan Prayer Nursery in Easthampton, and there's already a bunch of people in Easthampton on that list. All of these organizations, and they have different resources, but they all offer either a slide or a card kit or suggestions, and I think that would be a great way to get started with that read wheel. Also, the community team talked to, I'm not sure exactly who in the schools and local Girl Scouts, who said that they would be interested in getting involved with this. I also think this is not really part of the plan, but I just want to point out that I think that would be a wonderful way to start developing a contact list of folks who are interested, and start thinking about the resources that we already have going on. And maybe if there's clusters that would be good neighborhoods to kind of focus our efforts on, or conversely, if there are neighborhoods where we're not finding people are already connected, to consider doing outreach so that everybody is picking up information equally. Oh yeah, I'm flagging things that are required resources on the ones that are. So one of them is putting a webpage with resources for residents on the website. I think we've got a really good online here from the resources that the Conway Plan has created. There's also a lot of other resources out there that we can draw from. And poking around, I found a couple of other examples that I think we could learn from in terms of putting this together. Specifically, some of the resources that they offer include recommendations for how interested individuals and businesses can do things on their own, maintenance guidelines, converting any lighting to amber LED, which is much less intrusive from pollinator health, and it's like a really easy thing to switch to, and maybe some convincing information about how cost effective it would be. And yeah, I'm sure there's things that we can look at, things that are in the climate action plan. Okay. Third, we could plan some community outreach events, which cover a vast breadth of possibilities, all of which are very exciting to me personally. And I will come up on other people's priority lists, but I think these are all really, really wonderful ways to talk with folks and start developing an engaged group of people interested in moving things forward. Okay, next section, because this is going to take 15 minutes. Things that we could consider approaching on a municipal level. So conversely, these, I'm guessing, are going to be more effective in terms of their actual impact because they're broader scale, and at the same time will be probably much more challenging to implement and require more effort on our part. Okay, so the first of these is figuring out how to implement policy changes within property that's already managed by the city. And I want to point out that Sources offers this publication called Parks that I haven't gone to, but has a lot more information about ways that public lands can be managed in a more habitat-friendly way. According to the Conway Plan, Parks and DOT actually wrote about PPW already use minimal pesticides. And I think there's probably a conversation there to understand how they're currently approaching management, if there's guidelines that we could offer that are, a little more habitat friendly. Similarly, if there's a way for us to suggest that people in the city who are planting choose native species and maybe offering support how to make that happen, and the possibility of converting city land that's being maintained as a turf lawn into pollinator habitat, or if not, wholesale 100% conversion, how to include some features that would support habitat. This is one of the maps from the plan, and the areas in green are municipal land. So there's actually don't know the middle, but it's a good chunk of change. Another thing that the plan bring up that is kind of interesting is that this very landscape design concept of acoustic care, which is kind of a psychological thing that people react way better to naturalized landscapes, which can look messy or unmanaged or unintentional if there are indicators that they're intended and being taken care of. Like a really clean edge is an effective one, including some kind of signage, public art, like a mural, and they included a lot of guidance about doing kind of public art or community outreach as an element in this, which is kind of interesting, and suggested that we consider connecting with the city arts commission and maybe the schools in order to discuss that possibility. They also brought up suggesting installing readers in schools, which I think would be an interesting thing to learn more about if maybe a slightly different direction. Schools or just other buildings that are owned by the city. As a part of this, going multiple places, I stuck it in here. Coming back to the point about the demonstration gardens. Thank you. There's a lot of information in the plan suggesting next steps, sample plans. So this is already like kind of built out, and they got a level of buy-in from the public engagement process. Definitely questions about how to fund and install and actually implement this, and if there's ways to tie this into other priorities, like a monitor corridor that connects with private gardens. But I just want to bring up that this is one of the options that they kind of suggest as a strong contender. Okay, second, this could be maybe the beefiest one in here. Choosing to advocate for a city ordinance or other regulatory change. They did a lot of research reviewing the city's zoning ordinances and planning ordinances, and specifically they identified introducing an element to the operations and maintenance plans for developers to require native plans as a part of the site review process. And they also suggested building into stormwater management regulation, which I think is a really interesting idea, especially because there's so much development coming down the pike. So if there's a way that we kind of get our monitor hooks in, that's an interesting idea. They also brought up incorporating hybrid solar developments for folks who are less familiar with that. It's including a lot of habitat as a part of solar developments. And there's a lot of folks in Massachusetts who are working on this and implementing those projects right now. Other kinds of ordinances, a street tree ordinance. Our neighbor Easthampton passed one in 2015. There's a lot more detail about how that's going through and how we've managed to fund it. One thing that I didn't have a chance to look into was seeing if this was already incorporated into the Main Street Master Plan. And I don't really have a good sense of what stage of implementation that's at, and if there's like a way to sneak it at this point.
I know we're not doing it for Union, so I'm suspicious we're probably not doing it for Maine.
Things like such a different opportunity. Okay. Something that's gotten a lot of hype in the last couple of years is native plant ordinances. Somerville, I think, is the only city in the state that has one at this point. There's mandates half of the plantings for street trees have to be native, and public land has to be 75% native, except for things like athletic fields. Okay. Relatedly, there's some kind of interesting like public-private partnership opportunities here. That would be a pretty heavy lift, but I think really, really intriguing towards finding some way to get money to incentivize or refund people, whether individuals or business owners or whoever, who are interested in converting pollinator habitat. One example they offered is sidewalk strips in Easthampton. That land is owned by the city, but residents are responsible for maintaining it. So I'm wondering if there's some way to, I guess the plan is wondering if there's a way to offer guidelines for people who are interested in getting into that to do so. And as a case study in Seattle, DOT encourages people to do that by waiving the fee for permits. I'm not sure permits for what, but they make it easier for people. Love that. Similarly, there's a couple of places, seems to be all in Minnesota, that have programs to incentivize or rebate private citizens to convert or install native habitat or rain gardens. A lot of different models for how those are put together. The one in Blaine, Minnesota, was the city formed an auxiliary organization outside of the municipal government and got funding for that. And it seems like it's been incredibly effective in the last 2 years. We're able to convert 1.2 million square feet of habitat and 1,000 trees. Pretty inspiring stuff. Another case study is Seattle Connect, which is a really cool green space, or it's a pollinator corridor that connects two green spaces over a mile with all of the, I don't know if it's all, but like a lot of the lawn space in between these two green spaces converted to pollinator habitat with a diverse blend of public and private funding. It's been so successful that they're looking to install second line corridors this year. Something that Hal brought up was that it would be valuable for us to figure out what makes a successful and functional corridor. How close together do gardens need to be, how long do they need to be, how far away from the street. So there's details to be worked out, but there's a lot of precedents out here that I think could be really interesting to look into. They had, I'm not going to go into too much detail, they had a whole item in there about how to suggest things for connecting with agricultural producers and focused on agroforestry windbreaks along the edges of fields. And they found a natural resource conservation funding to install buffer strips, or maybe we could ask folks if they're interested in opting in and offer support for doing so. I know there's a lot of people in Western Mass who are doing things like chestnut farming, so I wonder if there's some possible synergies to explore.
For 15 minutes, so
This is my last slide.
there we go.
Okay. Thank you. So, in short, we tried to categorize these into one possible framework. Things that are the easiest lifts and that we could sort of carry out immediately. The resource page on the website, and be doing a registration drive for existing gardens. Things that seem pretty easy but might take longer. This is what I turned out. The committee one-on-one outreach, if we have time to discuss, I can have that back in. Planning these community outreach events. Harder, but maybe, not the hardest of all would be figuring out how to offer guidelines for municipal property. And toughest and probably would take the longest would be regulatory changes and funding. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. So coming out of that, there are some broad categories for priorities there. One of the things that's going to be a little bit difficult, I think, for this priority discussion that we're about to say is that, like, I think we're going to have a little bit of issue trying to figure out, like, how broad the priority should be. I think we can have a few things that are uber specific. Owen has a good idea for that. But then some of the uber specific stuff fits well into some of these broader categories. We could say that we have, a broad category priority, or only going to work on something super specific for that broad category for this initial kind of tranche of the effort. And like this discussion is going to be like hard to figure out right now. But so I'm just going to like try and get into it, and then we're just going to have to do our best with what we're going to come up with. So first thing first, I want to just kind of go around the table and have everybody, give a list of what their priorities are going to be. Kind of take notes of that. I don't think we've got time because I was like going through it. I had suggested using the better polls thing, and I still really love to do it. I don't know if people saw it, but honestly, it is a user interface there. Probably going to require a little bit of like teaching people, and I don't know that we have time. So I have no idea how to do that unless they're completely actually put on into doing it out a completely unrelated to anything poll. People can just vote in to see how it works, and then we can decide if we ever want to use it in the future. Should any of these types of conversations come up in the future? That also, to me, means it's going to be a little bit harder to figure out the priorities, but we'll see what we do. Obviously, I'll take suggestions from people. But for starters, let's go through and kind of get like
top 5 of this, or, you know, everybody did this. And then if anybody wants to, you know, we'll kind of categorize those in there. And, you know, I also thought about bringing, I didn't know if we had a whiteboard or anything, so I didn't bring it, but I thought about bringing stickies that we could kind of put into broad categories, and I didn't do that because I didn't think we had a whiteboard, and we don't. So
Google Meet does have like a whiteboard function.
we didn't have, not everybody has the, not everybody has the stuff. I'll try some other stuff in the next time. And I know, I think we're just gonna all have to kind of take notes and ask each other, you know, do old school things. So I'm going to suggest Jamie. You have a yep, you have a priorities.
I think starting with the basics of the connections to existing groups and the registrations with those appreciate the local, state, and national options for those. I think that's a very strong first step that again already captures some things. I think doing one of the demo at one or more of those sites that have been laid out with the Conway group study, I think that would be a good idea as well. I think working with maybe talking to the Parks Department because as much as they say that they don't, they're trying to reduce pesticide use and those sorts of things. Like I think there's probably a lot different between what would be needed and what would be happening on the ground. I know as somebody who helps oversee like a huge soccer field, that not everything has to do with Parks control with stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff that's sports related, but other opportunities that we have within the parks to do some things there. So those are the top things that I had in mind. Going back to some of the other things that we saw here, I like bringing in energy part. I do, I like encouraging and supporting any solar developments, doing like an agri-solar. I don't know if that might be an ordinance level or at the very least, preference that can be stated. Let's see. Maybe on the fifth. Yeah.
Did you have anything you want to add or go through what you have on the side that was separate from the consolidated action planning review?
I mean, I don't have anything that's outside of these. There are some that I'm particularly excited about or think are particularly strategic that you're mentioning.
Yes, please.
Okay. I think the no-brainer is adding a resource page to this website. It's easy and it's required.
Just for everybody's FYI, I did email the IT director. I copied Owen. She only replied to Owen. I was trying to get a head start on that, but I couldn't. So sorry about that.
Second, I agree. I think the registration one is really good starting place. Especially as far as building our contact list. These are all the same, actually. Liaisons and departments and parks to see what opportunities we can transition to management guidelines as we have a new ordinance. And getting folks to opt in seems like a great starting point. I'm excited about outreach events, workshops for volunteer work parties to support our group who are already interested in converting to habitat. They just need all support getting there. And then I couldn't decide between both of those. So, yes, thank you. Great. Researching funding to implement pollinator demonstrations on land. That one, it feels like 50% of the way there is we have we have plans, just to figure out like trying to make it happen. And then similarly, I'm really stoked about the idea of developing a program to offer cost sharing for lawn garden conversions.
All things that previously sound great. I think what my top priority is that I'm attending this commission as a liaison to the Agricultural Commission and sharing what's going on here at that commission so that there can be collaboration and support communication between these commissions. And then the thing that piques my interest the most is the lawn signage that the cues to care. In this, we're going into springtime, people are starting to rake leaves and lawns, and that education piece of signs available to those that want it to, it's like, put that sign on the lawn and not feel bad about letting grass grow and leaves accumulate, that there's something going on there for lawn. I think that would be my top priorities.
So my broader, one was related to, use it in terms of, parks, and maybe also DPW in terms of, mowing or the management. Here, I also feel like getting movement towards, reducing emissions of lawnmowers. And I don't know in terms of the equipment that the city has, but if we could make a transition away from those mowers that also fuel emissions, that would be ideal. Because I think it all comes together. I mean, if you're living the landscape that you're trying to, and then related to that was, just the reduction and also sort of, I think some of the fertilizers that people have, which kind of end up, going into the waterways, and we've seen the ponds frequently kind of get overgrown and so that needs to be managed too, because everything's related in terms of ecosystems. I would love to see expansion of pollinator habitats on city properties, multiple sites. One I think I had mentioned when I think our folks were at Winterfest last year was Pleasant Green Park, across from the mills. It's a very underused park. Place is used more frequently, but there's that field that's basically a desert. And I feel like actually in terms of having some continuity beyond the houses there's like Pasconic area conservation land. So between there and say the other side of the mills, if there's a way to sort of link up like having pollinator gardens and Pleasant Park, maybe some of the mills would be interested in green roofs there, and that would sort of have that as kind of a pathway for the area around Millside Park and the ponds. That's just my personal preference.
The clarification, when you're saying the mills, you're talking about the Pleasant Street mills.
Yes, okay, Pleasant Street mills, sorry.
Making sure I'm on the same page.
The other reason I point that area out is one of my others is just around environmental justice and equity, and not restricting this to areas where people have more land, but poorer, more working class communities are where the neighborhoods are denser. I think it's really important to not overlook those neighborhoods, particularly if you want community support. So I think Pleasant Green Park might be a good site, and there might be other areas in like New City that shouldn't be overlooked. Because if we want people to become stakeholders, they need to see that, how this benefits them and not just sort of more elites per se. And then the last would be just around the issues of lighting. Since I serve on the Manhattan Rail Trip Committee, I mean, it's great. We have the lighting along the sections of the rail. They're bright. It's not great for pollinators. Moths and bats are also pollinators, but not if you have the level of lighting that you have. So if we can sort of begin to make a transition where it's less bright and more conducive.
Is that what the amber lighting does?
Hmm?
So it's just
Yes.
the amber
That's
lighting.
part of it. You
instead of
also
anything?
need to point down as opposed to straight out like that. way that they're currently doing.
Or, you know, have some that are on motion detectors or things like
Yeah.
that, where, or even like, along the trail, if they were on timers where, I mean, how many people are traveling on the trail after midnight, for example?
More generically, there's recommended dark sky ordinances the same way that they're recommended all this other stuff, and like certainly on the longer term, you know, to broadly categorize what you're saying, I personally would also want to long term look at like advocating for dark sky ordinances in Easthampton.
Okay.
Similar sort of thing. Anything else?
That's it.
Great. Owen.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think in agreement with most of the people here, I think that a lot of people are interested in this topic in general, but it seems a little bit difficult for them to wrap their head around it. And so the education, I just wrote education empowerment. And so we already have some really good, robust information in the pollinator action plan that we can pull into some sort of city website and say, basically, like, here are 3 different size pollinator gardens, and each one, you know, goes from a smaller amount of plant species to a larger amount of plant species too. Here are the specific species, here's where you could buy them. And maybe even some planting demos, although that's probably not, that probably isn't too difficult to figure out, but should have videos and stuff like that. And then kind of as a sort of corollary to that, a very specific example is last year we did Novo May. And I think a lot of people were really interested in that, but then there were also people, then there were people who were very much not interested in that. And then there were people in the middle who said, well, I can't do this. I can't not mow my entire lawn. And I think we have a great opportunity here to show that, well, yes, so like kind of the extreme example of that is not mowing at all, allowing some wilding of your lawn with some exceptions of making sure that you're not growing invasives, but you know, no mow make it means something as simple as just not mowing a strip or installing a small replacing turf areas with a pollinator garden. So being able to maybe, we have a couple months to do this, but if we can quickly come out with like, here are 5 different ways you can participate in No Mow May for in time to give that to people in a couple months, 2 months, I think that could go a long way. And it's kind of like building off of the first part. I really love the green strip idea. I know that we have to establish really clear guidelines for people. There's someone in town who has a wonderful green strip garden, except for the fact that the species that they chose are so tall that they actually cause visual obstructions for motor vehicles. So we have to be really specific about you know, what you should plant there, so it doesn't become problematic, but it's still contributing to biodiversity and native habitat. Obviously, figuring out, like, probably determining exactly where we want to do a demo garden, and then looking into funding for that. I believe that's something we could use CPA funding for, both to fund, you know, design as well as implementation. So we can double check on that, but I don't see why not. And then, you know, one of the things we're tasked to do, and I know, you know, you had indicated that it's a little heavier of a lift, but part of the obesity requirements is we have to come up with some regulations around native plants. And so whether it be an ordinance or basically just design requirements. So DHCD basically says for all their developments, you just have to use native plantings. And I think that's potentially one of the simplest things we could do. That if I've looked at the Somerville ordinance, and in some ways, like, I appreciate kind of the detail that they went into, but just use native plants. And, like, if you're putting in a housing development, use native plants. If you're doing commercial industrial and you're going to do any sort of landscaping, it's not turfgrass, use native plants. And I mean, maybe you could start getting into, like, well, you know, you have to have X amount of area that is native, that's plantings versus turf, but you know, and provide in the appendices, one of the appendix of our ordinances, here's their native plant list that will be reviewed, you know, ever so often, and include, you know, both, you know, perennial shrubs, trees, and So that is 5. I wrote a few other things down, but we'll leave it at that for now. A few other ideas. Yeah.
Just interject something. Thanks. I think we're gonna have to be flexible around the definition of native plants because the climate zones are shifting. So what's native now may not be native 10 years from now. And also that's true for species that are able to migrate, that we want habitat that they can move northward into.
Yeah. So, kind of quickly comment on that.
No, let's
Okay.
table that. I want to get through this, and then those are also specifics that will come up when we actually start talking about the specifics of the ordinance and stuff. I do agree with you. How?
Okay, well, I have the, enviable position of being able to agree with just about everything. But what first off, I would put my top two priorities on getting a web page to go. And I want to use that as a vehicle for conveying information, but also I would like to find out from other people who look at this. I'd like to develop a small survey. How many people have already taken steps on their private property to do things? And I think that would be useful. My second top priority is, recognizing that we have limited time, budgetary resources. Pick one of the 3 garden sites recommended by Conway School and do it. And I'm going to say, either the one by the municipal building or the one in the catchment area along the rail trail. Because that can then build. I mean, that's a tool for education, developing interest. People ask questions. And, it's close at hand to your Green Mill Park. But then in terms of a stretch of habitat connectivity, I focus on Park Street and doing, what was the term? Sidewalk strips. You had a different term. On down, ending at Mountain View School, because we had the teacher from Mountain View School speak to us at our last meeting about the projects we want to do. So to me, that's a logical corridor. So, and just things to think of. The city council has the power to do things by ordinances that apply to city departments. That's not going to be so easy for private landowners on their land. We need to, do a combination of mother may I, hey, this is a great idea. Here are some incentives to help you do the right thing. So we need that blend. And, finally, just there's a whole mix of small scale items, big scale items here. So we need to think about what is it we want to see, our desired future conditions. How do we get there? Effort, time, and cost. And then once we've got that straightened out so that we're using resources effectively, do it. So, I see that kind of progression, but we don't have the luxury of time to twiddle our thumbs.
Somebody wiggle that.
Oh,
So,
I have sold those. I signed out. I'm
She's
sorry.
getting the call.
Sorry.
Just click that. Yeah, you can do it.
so I'd like to see using the webpage, build and use that as an educational tool. And I think we should have some kind of outreach and tabling event at the upcoming Economic Conservation Trust Lansing in mid-May. Great.
Okay, and for me,
And there's more.
oh, we got more.
No. I mean, it's all been said.
Okay.
Okay, so
For me, I was wanting to sort of like make the priorities like relatively specific, kind of like especially things that we were going to start working on even between now and our next meeting. So
we
they
have
are
nicely
nicely
following
following
the categories that everybody else is talking about. So
one
one
that
that almost everybody is talking about.
I just sort of broadly categorizing outreach, and everybody more or less said that we want to get started on outreach, which I 100% agree with. Specifically, I was thinking between now and then, it would be good if we could get it at the winter farmers market, assuming that's still running, and start showing up that every week to start talking about stuff.
As part of that,
simultaneously, we need to be getting the website up so that when we go to the winter farmers market and any other events that we want to go to, we can have some resources. We have like built-in resources because we can go with the packet and the reference to the quality action plan. But I also think that, as part of that, we need to, as soon as possible, have like a website to be able to point people out. Yeah, no, we're out of time right now, but, can everybody go like a little bit longer? I don't know if there's like rules about that, or do we have to get it up now? Or?
No, I think
Only if someone else is scheduled for the room.
yeah, I don't think anyone's scheduled for the room, but I think generally more like trying to live an hour, but like, yeah, keep going.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Well, I don't do very well.
We just budget 2 hours.
I go up for the soonest, but I'm also like in a rush too. So.
And then the thing, and this is also part of the same idea, but this is all something we can literally start doing like this Sunday if we wanted to. Your idea about like starting to get an idea in a survey about how many people are already doing this stuff. I think whoever's doing outreach should start to develop a program of taking notes, and then we should have like starting to work up like an annotated list of supporters, talk to somebody's supporter, talk to somebody, not basically learn from canvassers. Who are actually very effective at what they do, and they can provide a lot of data for us. So we start to say like, talk to a supporter, talk to a non-supporter, give us information, got feedback, and have like a little bit of a coding that says we got feedback that they're already working on it, or they would like to work on it, but they don't know how, or they think this is stupid. So that for me, like, that for me is two priorities that I would say that we should do right now. One of which is getting one is actively starting to do the outreach via the farmers for sure. Any other events that anybody or whoever is doing outreach comes up with would be great. Obviously, when I don't know when the conservation plan is, but it seems like further ahead of time. I do have okay, yeah, I do have a question about that. Also, that same group can be working on the MOA piece as well. So that's also categorized to me in the outreach section of priority one. The next one is the demo piece. I think that is something we should start working toward. Working back up the chain, I think potentially the number one priority there is figuring out methodology and funding. So if we're going to be volunteers, if so, we also like try and like get funding plans by volunteers. I do think we should be working on that, but I think specifically we should be working on what the mechanism is for how we get there and presenting that, which means as part of that, it rolls into Jenny's very, very, very good point that we need to start getting funding for stuff. Owen pointed out that we can get CPA funding for some stuff, but I don't think we should stop there. I think we should learn how to apply that at the same time. We need this potential funding sources that we're going to be able to draw from when we do these things. And one last thing, we may ordinances. I do think we should start working on an ordinance. Pick one right now, like basically for the next thing, because this is going to be a learning process. This is going to be a thing that takes a long time. There's no time like the present to get started. So I don't have an opinion about which ordinance we want to start working on. I think we should pick one that we think is more likely to succeed, as opposed to one that's more likely to be getting to people. But that. I think that's like already, what is that, 3 or 4 for me? Sorry. I know I'm getting a little bit broad here. I think the talking parts and starting to set up a good, find out what our relationship is with the various different departments, how much they want to listen, whatever we do, like get some data there, get a list of these are their concerns, these are the things they're excited about, these are the things they don't want to do, find out what they're actually doing. That's, because we're going to be primary or working with and through them. I think that's an important thing to do as soon as possible. And then the last thing I wanted to do, and this is like kind of my own, some other people mentioned this, like this is the biggest one that I didn't really hear from other people, is just started doing the work. Like last year, I had a group that it was an informal group. I do have an email list that I did this with that I called Not Just Butterflies. And we were going out along the Manhattan, and we did sort of some like potentially a little bit like information removal. And what I'd like to do is formalize it a little bit. I want to get like stuff made up. I want to be able to go out and do that. I don't know like who and how I get formalized permission for that. But like start doing that all over the place, and we can.
Is there going to be a citywide cleanup day? So that's like maybe that could be another element that's added to that. Is like
Yeah.
Do like cleanup and native plant
Yeah.
planting, appreciation.
We did invasive removals and it's the same sort of thing. So if we could figure out a way that we could like, I don't know, like invest and say it's okay for a group like a volunteer group like that to go out and start taking action in some sort of public space. That's the other thing that I would like to do kind of as soon as possible. And I have a little bit of a mechanism for that, but again, I don't know how much of that needs to be formalized versus not formalized. But we can do that. And I already have like 6 people. When we're removing things, we had probably 20 people ask who we would say thank you. If we'd had business cards or if we'd had like sign, we'd had 10, 15 more volunteers we could go right there. So those are unfortunately started to get bad of writing stuff down. But so does anybody, should I try and like summarize what I think are the like categories of priorities that we might want to vote on? And people can say like, I think we need to add this to the list of like things that we're voting on. First, does anybody else have like a good way of summarizing this that they would like to put forward as like a idea list? Oh.
Yeah, there was like, I mean, depending on what your anticipated time frame is there like an avenue that is a list of everyone's thoughts, everyone votes in it, and it will actually like tell us what.
That's what I wanted to do with it.
Right. Are you willing to wait for the next meeting? Is there anything you're aware of where we could do something like that?
Yeah, better poll. Like literally this website called Better Polls. And I had kind of set up for that, but we're not entirely there.
Most of these suggestions fit into similar.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't think we're far enough apart to wait for that.
I was just gonna ask if there was something we could do out of committee or if we need to do that.
That's the thing. You have to. And that's kind of like shortcut where we can be like, we all vote to agree, whatever the outcome of this vote is, will be emphasized at the next committee, and that effectively makes it like something that's legal.
I have to think about that.
So that's point to know.
If it's still, if it's a binding vote versus.
I mean, this is also related to how much, like we said as a group, for sure, one of our priorities I want to do right now is outreach, and then we'll figure out the other 3 later under that broad category of outreach that I was talking about like taping and stuff. Can the people that are working on the outreach come up with basically materials and stuff and start using them, and then just come back to the group for sort of approval or change recommendations or whatever. Like, they start using the stuff, and then they come and they say, this is what we've been using, this is the data we collected, and then we all are like, okay, you need to add this, you need to stop saying this, and then we vote on that, and that becomes the new official materials, and sort of iterate that way. And we empower people that way, because that seems like if we have to do, with the amount of material we need to make, we have to like vote on every single thing, we are going to get nothing done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think. Oh, sorry. I mean, a lot of the work we're doing is not necessarily binding as much as it is consensus. So, like, we're not voting on policy required. Where, like, so if it's like, here's a long list of things, and we let that out of the next meeting. Don't necessarily think that, and there's really not deliberation involved either, because everyone's just getting their input. It's computing, like figure out some sort of computer algorithm. So
we are basically then presenting your meeting.
So I don't think that's an issue.
Okay.
Because it's not like you take this list, like your 5 priorities and then I see them somehow and email you and say, oh, I don't like this, we have a conversation about it. So I don't think that that's necessarily not run out. My knowledge. So, and again, none of these, now obviously we were like having a conversation about the language of the ordinance, and then there's conversation about the meeting about that. That's where.
A lot of those specifics, I think, are a little bit more obvious,
Yeah.
like some of these other.
So it goes back, if you're like basically like put this all out there between our next meeting and by the next meeting, basically we'll sit down and have our list of priorities based on somehow some sort of program or something that allows us to happen, and that would probably be, that should be fine.
Okay. So the thing is, a lot of stuff, there's the difference between the specifics and whether or not we can start working, and then the less specific pieces and, or, just sort of the more general instance. So I definitely do that. We are going to have a little bit of one-on-one, make sure that like the encapsulations that I put in on the, basically I'm gonna have to set up those things for consideration. And then other people are gonna have to be like, you missed this thing that I said, or the phrase needs to be updated to this before I put out the final version that says like, this is what we're voting on.
Because I think all of these areas are working hand in hand, they're kind of integral to each other.
I do as well.
These broad areas of outreach, emphasis online, connecting with existing resources, funding, and volunteer organizations, seem like the broad broad strokes. And then there's a lot of tasks associated with those. But it's really hard to, I would think it'd be hard to tease out.
Right.
Building garden requires volunteer funding, outreach.
Right.
People, something, should show up, volunteer. All of these things kind of work together. So if I'm capturing this discussion of action steps, it's kind of one person's perspective of how to sort it out.
Yeah.
Achieve goals with that considered each, because even if you're talking about funding, or you're funding or for signage to go to people, funding for building art is funding for someone who has to produce a website. So it's hard to tease it all out. So that has to be this rolling process.
Yes. Yep. I think that's necessary.
Yeah. I think so. Handles progress.
Right.
I'm curious. Yes. Yeah. Process build it and then at the same time. Is that the same?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, for instance, May is 2 months away, so if we were to agree with the next meeting is a month, or we'd be basically at the time that someone who's trying with it.
I know. I don't see any way we can avoid signing it to somebody and having them. Does anybody have any major concerns with like? I mean, I think it's part of the assignment to somebody and have them run with it. We are going to want them to come back with like details about what they are doing, so that we can, as a group, advise them, give feedback, say we don't want this particular piece of it to happen anymore. But I think for my money, we need to give it to people and just let them run with it. As long as we don't get into like discussions or something, if the group of people working on it gets too big. So here's what I think. And folks can tell me if they want to go with this or not. I think there are immediate priorities between now and the next meeting. My vote would be like, we say, we're gonna start the outreach thing, and whoever the outreach working group, is that okay?
Yeah.
The outreach working group is going to figure out how to get a table at the Winter Farmers Market and maybe start tabling as much as possible with a particular focus on no way. And or website once we get that up, with the website being a second priority as I do the same group. So there's all that two things. Those two things we do. So we'll call outreach one, the outreach initiation one, we'll call the city website the other one. And again, if people want to switch the details, I'm just trying to be specific enough to get us through to the next meeting, and then we can also work on the, like, hey, I think that, from what we were talking about, I think that having a group specifically starting to talk or look up funding is definitely worthwhile. I think part of that, we should, like, specifically demo funding, potentially, I think we should have three demo funding. I think we should have maybe like three specifics we're looking to funding for. I don't have a good,
Cost sharing for like lawn to garden.
that was a popular one. Cost sharing. Garden. Do we want to think about anything that, in terms of what about for a third item, whether there was any funding for like training or support or parks departments and stuff to help them do native plants, which would then feed into being able to talk to the parks department and the Department of Transportation and stuff. Does that seem, would that be an interesting funding line to look at? And then, because the next thing I was going to talk about was talking to the conversation started with the departments that we're going to have to work with. Okay. Sorry, yes.
To clarify funding for like a speaker.
Any kind of training we could come up with, just like training in general, which is sort of what I was thinking about. We had the speaker actually like a grant for them to.
So, I mean, let me by interest and then we do this an approach. I don't know about plants. So I would like to learn about native plants.
Yeah.
And so I don't have Dave making recommendations for native plants on the gardens without having a little bit more solid foundation under my feet. So you mentioned in our discussions. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's right. I was going to say, oh, yes. Could you come for our next meeting and talk to us?
So what I was raising my hand to say is I wonder if third funding that you just discussed would be planning like a workshop. And those would definitely be high on my list.
Yeah.
I have a couple other suggestions for folks who could.
I think that would be good because that would draw people in as well as educate me.
Yep. I'm in touch with him, so I could be the person to make that connection theoretically.
Okay, so for the funding line, gardens, workshops, and green trips. No, demo garden was specifically one of the ones from the pollinator action plan. And I don't think we have to choose which one we would be going for to look into the funding. So I do think that that's probably enough of a prerequisite for the demo garden that we should just, that we can do that first and then look for the demo garden once we have a little bit more of an idea about how we're going to like manage that. Okay, so, and then those three things, and then the last thing about parks, and if anybody wants to start talking to like the department conversations, not only departments necessarily, but also, I know we have other committee stuff built in here, but if like for instance, a thing that I came up when somebody else was talking was, do we want to start talking to the marijuana pond committee and try and bring them in on the, like, you know, reduction in fertilizer usage so that we can, like, because we can be like, hey, you don't have this, and you might have this. So department speaking would be another one of my top 5 here from what we were all talking about. And the last one was picking working and started working on it. If only that year, but mostly just like does a little bit of research and comes in next time with 2 or 3 ordinances that they want to suggest, and we all vote on which one we actually want to start working towards. Okay, so that's my consolidated by the next time rough top 5. And then to vote on, and I can try and restate that for somebody else, if somebody is taking notes can restate it. And then, does anybody have anything that they would like? If I was going to put that up for a vote, does anybody want to have suggested differences?
Well, pulling back for a moment, I just feel like we need to say that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And that feels like we're just like throwing everything against the wall and seeing what can stick. And getting it where it's more concrete. Because I mean, I'm just thinking about outreach alone. Like, there's myriad ways you do outreach. Doing outreach where you're going to be targeting the people that you want to target. You know, or you're going to be just preaching to the choir. You know, and that's sort of intending to. Like, we need to make sure that we're reaching out to the people who we need to reach out to, and then just we're putting something out there and seeing what sticks or grows. And I'm very process oriented, so I mean, I think sort of I'm a little overwhelmed with everything just sort of presented, and I mean, I don't disagree with us pursuing any of those tasks, but I like organizations, so I feel like, you know, maybe we sort of need to spend some time sort of like drilling it down where we have a plan rather than this and you're with this and you're with this, and then we're not coordinated. I think doing it sort of waste time instead of like getting to where we want to get. The other thing I say, the Military Committee, often we're inviting the DPW or parks directors to join us and including dialogue. I think it's helpful rather than us going to them basically saying, you know, we have something to give you. We need to be involved in the dialogue so that they're not involved. And I think then there are allies, and then we're working together rather than sort of like kind of pushing to do things that, you know, they don't have the time for or the budget for, and it's just, you know, it's no fault. And I think that would be counterproductive. So I know I think that, you know, something we can do more easily than others, but, you know, let's also take a breath.
So I hear what you're saying there. I do think that for me, like, iteration is key. I think, like, with a lot of these things, there's a lot of discovery that we have to do, and a lot of the only way that we're going to be able to do that discovery is to start doing the things, and then getting data back in and being able to look at what we've, you know, done or found out, and be able to, you know, turn back around. For instance, with the outreach, specifically why I wanted to do like hey, but because it's not targeted. And because we can't put together like who might be interested and who might not be interested in what some of the like pushback options are in the areas in which people have concerns, but then allows us to make decisions and come up with better approach to people and figuring out who we need to approach. I also think that to a certain extent, preaching to the choir when we don't have a baseline of volunteer force or people that we are doing things like there's a certain amount of choir preaching we have to do to sort of marshal what capability we can you know, have to do in the community. Like, you know, it excites people to learn that they have like a lot of resources and a lot of like-minded people around them. So I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing in that particular case. And in terms of like throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks, like it is a marathon. I'm not interested in like overwhelming it and letting myself do it. But I think that if we have volunteers to make good faith efforts towards any of all of these things in small subgroups rather than trying to do this as everything all at once, then I don't see any reason to restrain those folks from going forward and starting to do that work.
That being said, I do think you should be mindful of if you're acting as a representative of the Peace Committee and any of these capacities, or acting out our own, listening to our own inspiration and our own motivations. So to be clear, those two things, the Peace Committee, there's some structure and some agreement to what we as individuals are representing in the community versus something we'd be really excited about and want to move forward with that might not only be captured or encompassed with the action steps of the Bees Committee, and that's where fleshing out what the committee is trying to achieve versus individual agenda and we're excited about. Spending.
I think the perspective that I would offer, I share a lot of your feelings about wanting to be thoughtful and strategic and make sure that we're directing our efforts thoughtfully. I think my reading of the priorities that Sean suggested is that we've got one kind of urgent time-bound action item that's looking at what we can accomplish for May. And the other 3 or 4, however we're counting them, are kind of research and investigating next steps and feel a little bit more less urgent. So I wonder what Brandon helps thinking about how to commit our efforts in the next 6 weeks or whatever.
We'll find out. I'm with you on the process oriented side. I think for me, the way it's helpful and maybe the way we can break this down is to just sort of finish probably a task oriented sort of thing, right? There's like specific tasks that are being assigned, and that's what you're going to report back on the next time. And not necessarily you're going to have all the information, but it's like, okay, can we check the box that we did this part? And maybe that means we got to redo it or we got to do another part of it the next time. Or something like that. I'm trying to break this down in my head that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, none of this is saying this is going to be done by the next time. For instance, like, the funding research is basically would be like, we have a few ideas. Are there any of these that we want to pursue? Or is there something else that somebody discovered that we should look into? The ordinance was specifically only coming up with a couple of suggestions for what our first target ordinance would be, which is, not that, I don't think that's necessarily a huge discussion. And then when we start working on that ordinance, then I think we will be a lot more deliberate as it relates like how we work through those steps as a learning process before we get there, or hopefully how we get some if we are successful, and we figure out some ways to be sort of like efficient and get like, these are the things that worked, these are the things that didn't work, these are the things where we need to do a better job about prepping ourselves on some of the pushback that we're going to get. That feels, to Jenny's point, to me, it feels like most of this stuff is sort of like the groundwork being laid. You almost put your hand up earlier, dude.
No, yeah. I think everyone is saying similar things. I think we're basically doing here much like we did last meeting. This meeting is basically developing a few agenda items. In this case, we have essentially 4 or 5 agenda items, and we're starting to flesh them out within essentially like subcommittees, working groups, whatever, of 1 or 2 people. And they'll come back, we'll record a next meeting, we'll discuss each one, we'll kind of hash that out, and then we'll go to the next one. So I think it will be process oriented. I think that we're just developing a little framework, and it will build over time. We'll potentially complete some of the arguments, we'll take them off the list, we'll add new ones. So I think this will work out, because I don't think we're asking necessarily for something to be done the next time as much as like just bringing information and seeing where we are at that point, having and then we'll have a discussion about each of these items.
Let me ask one question. For the things that I listed, and if I'm going to ask for each thing that we're to have those as items. Would you as individuals be interested in being one of the people that was working on it? And if we had an ideal state, maybe we get like most of the group for many of the things. But if we have something where I'm like, does anybody want to work on this? And we're all like, then that can come on the list. Different suggestion. We approve that first. So each person goes around and says what he or she would like to work on between now and the next meeting. Great. I've got 4 items. Okay. I will, and I'll get as far as I can, and maybe I will try it all. And I will take whatever help people want. Okay. So I will contact this conservation trust and get their agreement to have us, just have people at their plan sale. I will develop a little info package on May, because I already do that. I will develop a little info package on
You did. Oh, maybe I mentioned a voluntary survey. I'd like to know who else is doing it. I think it's things we could share at the table at this County Conservation Trust. And I had one other thing, which my memory is so much better than yours, you know, mine. Anyway, those are several things that I will commit to try to take several steps on. Okay, for our next meeting. And if people are willing to do that, yeah.
Okay, so we have David, this is comment. Survey on your gardens, kind of a how-to on no May.
Plant sale out of normal May and survey.
Yeah.
If somebody reached out to the farmers market and set up a table there, would you have any interest or would you be participating in that or no?
I would like to look at my schedule before. That is no.
Totally fair.
Yes, so
Maybe. Maybe.
right.
Okay. All right. Oh,
I could definitely start looking at some more framework. And I talk to people about the options, particularly the developer argument.
If we were to, if somebody else were looking at funding options, would you want to have them bounce ideas off you and ask you things and?
Absolutely.
Hey.
I need to think about it.
I plan on sharing an update from this committee to the Ag Commission.
I'm happy to start building out what a website could look like, and I'm happy to collaborate on materials. Not saying like I will build a website the next time I'm thinking about an outline of what pieces could be helpful to include in it. I'm also happy to start putting out feelers for industry professionals who might be able to offer some time for training. And I'm also happy to help research either funding or references, whichever would make useful.
Is that definitely an or is that potentially an and?
But I think that would be sort of like as
yeah.
I'm interested in looking at funding opportunities. Interested in website side of things as well. At some level, I'm not a designer in it anyway, but like I'm helping with the city. Stuff from the energy side, I'd potentially like to get out. We'll be working to get out there. I'll be working with the technology department here in the very near future. So I'm happy to be helpful there.
Okay.
I'll be certainly reporting back to the energy committee, energy advisory committee with this, and talk about stuff in the context of the climate action plan as well, and where there's potential overlap with private there, and like anything that makes sense to partner on or work in tandem with.
Great. And for me, I'm absolutely interested in starting for some of the outreach options. So I'd be curious about the materials you come up with how. And that's something that I'll be too. I'll be happy to reach out to the farmers market and get a table, comes down to, and try to. No, I mean, yeah, one question is if I go to the farmer's market, do I put like a banner that says these on it, or do you all want me to wait to have officially whatever material there?
What material we better dispose? We're promising to develop that
Yeah, executing.
We can pull stuff from the pollinator action plan. We potentially can share the website, if we've got the website up, which is gonna be, I think, a function of talking to IT and saying it's available. And even if all of that website is, you know, more coming soon with the packet from the pollinator action plan, to me, that's sufficient start, because they're working here. But that's the question mark for us.
Can I add potentially too, the benefit of just even starting to show up at the farmer's market, not having a lot of material is just letting people know you exist and then potentially getting an email list.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When you do figure it out, but I know it's like, yeah, not much to necessarily be about yet.
I'm happy to help with, you know, potential funding sources, resources, or ordinance resources, if anybody wants to. And what else was there on the maybe list? More or less covers the major points. Okay, so I think that covers most of it, does it not? Then it's up if you're trying to raise a hand or if you're playing with your pen. Sorry.
I'm doing both. Sorry, I missed it just to check if everything is covered. Did somebody volunteer for thinking about doing the municipal departments? Do you somebody? I'm not volunteering for that,
Picture, like, I really like your framework of like easier, more immediate, and then. I don't think I've just.
I think that's a longer term thing probably, and requires us to have a little more, sorry, raise my hand. A little more large stuff figured out, like sort of our messaging, like our goals, where we really, I think that's wise. And I would just say, when we're talking about the department, let's not forget the schools.
Oh, yeah.
Part of that as well.
Yeah, I think David makes a really good point that we can, in all those background conversations we have a more robust conversation about policy or procedures. We should have right now from UPW or counties and over there designate. From those discussions part of it here to actually.
I suppose when I was thinking about it, I was thinking more like talking to them and finding out what kind of reactions they had.
Yeah,
Like meetings that we had, not going in hot and being like, we're gonna tell you how to do your planting. So they were like, we have these ideas, there's things that are interested in, what do you think about them, what are your concerns, is there anything here you're excited about? So when I was thinking about outreaching to them, it was more like asking questions than it was being directive. But also, I think right now we don't have any current volunteer for it, so I think it's fine to let we have more concrete things to offer. I do think we basically cover the rest of the stuff that we can talk about there, though.
Do you still want to set up the voting thing for the longer list?
I want to do something there just to see if it can be useful. So how about if we say we vote, like, I'll put together a kind of exhaustive list of stuff for approval, it can be kind of long, and then like, so the approval voting thing is you only like say whether you are interested in working on it. I'll put a time frame on it, like next 6 months maybe, or something like that, or not. And then we'll just see how it works when people can understand the outcome and whether people like it. And it's totally not binding, and it's more an experiment in whether it's a useful tool for us. Does that sound good? Okay, so I will also be putting together maybe a little based on conversations today. And with that, since it's definitely going to be coming up, I think I'm going to just kind of put it in, and I'm just going to put out what I can come up with from my notes. And we're not treating findings, we're going to decide, you know, next meeting, it's going to be useful. So I missed something, it's not the end of the world, we're not actually doing those things. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. So I think we have
more or less next steps. I would like, okay, so we had two people. You were interested in funding and you were interested in funding. Is that correct?
No, you were maybe on things, but you were yes on ordinances.
Sure.
But you were yes on ordinances. I was not. So how about we do funding? Ordinances. How you and I will be talking some about tabling procedures and materials. Okay. So let me just try and write this down to make sure. Something. Evening outreach. Let's see. You, me, and who else was interested in the website? Dave. Sorry. Hi, guys. Jenny, Jonathan, and Jamie for website.
You said something before the table. I was on tabling it out. Maybe Sean on the website, and you had said something.
Jamie and Owen for funding, and Jenny and Owen for ordinances. Oh, and Jenny is going to look into professionals that might be willing to come give talks, workshops, etc. As a community wide. And
I think there's multiple directions we could go, and I was bringing that up in connection to sharing management guidelines, but I was originally thinking about it as public workshops.
so why don't we just generically say reach out to professionals and come back with some, if you find any potentials that people would be willing to do either the library or this group or some other thing. So Jenny's gonna find his professional. I had something else to propose in my head right on those.
I was talking about the energy based climate action plan.
What's what we're gonna do is.
The schools.
Schools is good too. I mean, I kind of feel.
Listen, that's what we're focusing until next meeting. I've got kind of stuff in the future, and now I'm just kind of jumping back into what.
Now I'm jumping. Yeah, now I'm jumping specifically to my next meeting and kind of.
Miles and Sean, tabling and outreach, Jenny, Sean, Jamie, website, Jamie, Owen, funding, Jenny and Owen, ordinances, Jenny, reach out to professionals.
Yes. Okay. Did I miss anything that anybody else was?
I'm gonna share with it.
willing to
Share, you're gonna share with other committees.
Mhm.
Did you share?
Okay.
Okay. Maybe I'm just, or maybe misunderstanding that. That your action stuff is, and the other committees that you're on, sharing what's happening with these. The other committee, you're gonna misunderstand that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you said you were gonna reflect. But you said you were gonna consider what you were able to commit to.
Well, considering a lot of things.
Yeah. That you were gonna.
Excuse me for the interruption.
With your permission, can I share on the conservation commission?
Information for that.
I mean, two minutes next month.
I'll put it on the agenda.
Cool. Okay, anybody else have anything that they were welcome to do by next meeting that I missed?
I figured out one thing. I mean, the thing I forgot. I signed up my garden with 1,001 pollinators. I didn't see anything about lawn signage. I'll try to find out more about lawn signage.
I mean, that could be another item, like identify which of the many possible
And
ones.
then again, it'll generate public and person awareness and I'll just sign on that one. If it's, you know, FCC. acceptable.
Wow.
I mean, I have no bills on both sides, so, yeah, I can figure out how to that, like, how we want to do that, what to have people donate, you know, for something. I think we can talk about that.
It can be the ballpark, how much they cost to produce.
I think we like $12 inside the book.
Okay, so we have to for donation at the very least.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Signage, like breaking people's signs, we're not helping them break any laws, are they?
No, that's political stuff.
I can't believe they're abolishing the whole month of May.
That's right, your mom. Thank you. I appreciate what you did.
And I will be, we're not doing anything, we don't have an already, and we'll be coming up with the experimental vote. That's just to see if we like it as a tool.
Creating a list of approved voting as a tool for the community to fund priorities. Creating a list of approved. And then future, do you want me to?
Okay, I'm gonna do that by the next time. I'm gonna send that out as a draft by next time. I don't know if we can do it. Right. But it is a test, not anything that. Okay, does anybody have anything else that you want to talk about or work on or anything else?
Oh, yeah.
Great voice. Thank you, sir. So we do first Monday in April. People can live with it.
It's silly, everyone.
Okay.
6?
No, April.
So, I mean, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, yep.
Cool.
Six p.m. for everybody. Yep.
Clerk, or you want to go
I got it. Cool. All right, so Monday the 1st, 6 p.m. Is everybody okay with that? Yep. Great. That one, formal vote. Let me just write that. Okay. Motion to adjourn. Second. Motion to adjourn has been made, seconded. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Silence. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.